Would you ask Mr. Hayward to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Hayward, all ready to go?
I am indeed, sir, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett, when you're ready.
Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Hayward, we were in the middle of role play, or the topic at least. Can we please go to LFB 55220? And look again at the draft of Station Manager Ned Kelly's report of the 3rd of August 2010, page 6. This is another of the drafts. And under the heading Assessments and Results Recording, we have the following text. The final session of the day was practical role play. Again, this session meets the requirements of the Emergency Call Handling Techniques and Fire Survival Guidance Training document. And then at paragraph 41, you see at the foot of the screen, whilst the assessor does provide some measure of performance assessment of candidates during this role play, it is carried out in a very informal manner. There is no documented list of expected actions, behaviours against which candidates' performance should be measured, nor are there any records of performance documented at the time or after the role play. This may potentially expose the brigade should such records wish to be scrutinised at a later date. And then I'll ask you to turn the page to para 42 and 43. We'll look at those together. 42. Furthermore, candidates are exposed to only one role play scenario. Whilst there are limitations on the course in terms of time, it should be recognised that such role plays provide candidates opportunity to A, demonstrate that they have achieved the learning outcomes of the course, and to B, demonstrate under controlled conditions their current level of performance. As such, every effort should be made to ensure that candidates are given the fullest opportunity to demonstrate both A and B, and that suitable records of achievement are being kept. Observed candidates have commented that the role plays they undertook were, quotes, fairly straightforward, close quotes, and, quotes, not particularly challenging, close quotes. Opportunity therefore exists to strengthen the performance assessment element of the course. This may include lengthening the course to provide candidates with more exposure to role play scenarios, building a robust expected actions and behaviours assessment recording sheet, providing extra assessors during the role play elements, providing training performance recording. Recommendations of paragraph 45. Review the role play element of the course and ensure that a robust assessment and recording process is implemented. Now, against that background, this is, as I say, August 2010. Was the role play element for the FSG training reviewed in or after 2010 once this audit report had been circulated?
I believe it was. I believe there were FSG role play scripts written for it.
Were any of the 4 bullet points of paragraph 44 taken on board?
I don't believe we lengthened the course because the course was considered long enough.
Right.
We did do assessment and feedback for control staff, which we didn't have before. We didn't provide extra assessors during the role playments because I didn't have the ability at that time to do that back then.
But you would have done had you had the resources.
Yes.
Right.
Well, potentially we could have done. Improved training performance recording. Well, we've been over this yesterday, didn't we, about the recording? Yes, we would like to have done that, and we were making headway in getting that sorted out. But at that stage, it was still very much a manual process.
Right. Now, if we go to LFB 3055192, this is the minute of the Lackland House Board meeting the following month, 15th of September 2010. And we can see that you were present at the Lackland House Board meeting. And if you go, please, to page 2, you'll see item 5.8, which says this. LFB training came to audit control training team. They recommended introducing role play on a number of call types. Do you remember who provided that update? Was it you?
It could have been me, yeah, if I may have given that.
And was the reference there to auditing the control training team a reference to Station Manager Kelly's audit?
Yes, I believe it was.
Do you remember what was discussed at this meeting about the recommendations for role play?
I do not.
Were Station Manager Kelly's specific suggestions about strengthening the role play discussed? such as, for example, increasing the time available for the course?
I don't believe it was.
Right. Do you remember what the outcome of this meeting was so far as concerns his recommendations that we've just looked at?
I think we took those recommendations away and we're looking at how we can implement them.
Right. Can you look at paragraph 5.5 at the top of the screen? It says a full day of refresher training has been introduced, half of which is delivered by the fire safety team. Role play has also been introduced. Now, that's correct, is it? Or was correct at the time?
Yes.
Is it? And we'll come back to that in due course. But the full day of refresher training, is that a reference to what we saw earlier?
Yes, I believe it was.
As of September 2010 and the Chris Sharp emails
Yes.
and the 9 topics and the 6.
I believe so.
Yes, right. Then let's move on to pre-inquest action 12. We'll come back to this meeting in due course. Pre-inquest action 12 is development of refresher FSG training. And I want to ask you first about the topic of the biennial plan for refresher training. Can we start by looking at the Lacan Assurance Report from August 2018, LFB 404801, page 14, action 12, right-hand column, which says this: establish a recurring programme of fire survival guidance refresher training in accordance with the national guidance for all control personnel. And then underneath that it says, the national guidance, Fire Service Circular 1093, training of fire control staff, promotes continuation training, which it describes as, quotes, further continuation training should be carried out progressively with the aim of improving skills and knowledge gradually, close quotes. The guidance also recommends that on-watch refresher training should be given to all fire control staff on a systematic basis, i.e. it should be both scheduled and monitored. National guidance recommends that refresher training should be delivered no more than every 12 months. Can we go and look at the Fire Service 1093 again, please? That's at LFB 403617. I've shown you that. Let's just see what Fire Service Circular 1093 says about it. There it is. If we go to page 1, paragraph 5, it's headed Initial / Recruit Training. And if you look at paragraph 6 at the bottom of the screen, just above the green label, it says this: recruits with between 8 and 12 weeks of service who have gained some initial call handling experience should be given further training in emergency call handling techniques and fire survival guidance to enable them, when dealing with callers who are trapped in domestic accommodation, to make a proper assessment of the situation, give appropriate advice where necessary, and otherwise assist in minimising the hazard to the caller. An example of an appropriate training programme is given at Appendix B. Now let's look at Appendix B. This is on page 6. And that is entitled Emergency Call Handling Techniques, Fire Survival Guidance. And there we can see that it sets out the FSG training. Yes?
Yes.
And there are the 9 subjects that we've seen before.
Yes.
We saw them, I think, listed in the 1994 Keeping People Safe document, and some element of them also listed in Christine Sharp's email of the 10th of March 2010. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. If you look at the structure, it says the training should be presented jointly by fire control and fire safety personnel and should comprise a lecture session of 1 to 1.5 hours, followed by a practical role-play session to confirm the instruction. And then you've then got the 9 topics. If we go back to page 2 of this document, we have paragraph 7, which relates to continuation training there at the top of your screen, and it says this: following completion of initial training when the recruit is attached to the watch, further continuation training should be carried out progressively with the aim of improving skills and knowledge gradually. This should include the training set out in Appendix B. So once again, it's right, isn't it, that we see a reference to the FSG training in Appendix B on page 6? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And that's the reviews, that's the section of the national guidance that the assurance review we looked at has stated was part of the guidance for refresher training. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And looping all of those things together, it's right, isn't it, that it was an expectation in the national guidance that the refresher training would take the same form as the initial training, namely a 1 to 1.5 hour lecture with a practical role play.
Well, no, because the refresher training was to be a full day's training rather than what they're proposing there is an hour and a half of lectures by fire safety and control staff, and then a role play. We extended that by giving more time to go through the presentations and fire safety and to do the role play.
Yes, leaving aside the point about 1 to 1.5 hours then, would you accept that the refresher training would require practical role play?
Yes.
In the same way that initial training?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if you go to page 3, we can see another reference to refresher training. This is watch refresher training. It is recommended that on-watch refresher training should be given to all fire control staff on a systematic basis, i.e. it should be both scheduled and monitored. The subject matter will depend on local circumstances, but emphasis should be given to little-used procedures or areas of weakness. Would you agree that fire survival guidance was a little-used procedure?
No, I wouldn't say it was little used. It's certainly in London. We had fire survival guidance calls more frequent than you would think. Well, so I don't think it was compared to a normal fire call, then yes it was, but I don't think it was a rare call.
Well, the evidence received by this inquiry at phase 1, rather than me going through it, but would you agree tended to indicate that looking at the experience of those in the control room on the night of the 14th of June 2017 was pretty thin when it came to fire survival guidance. Very few of them had done any.
Oh, live calls.
Yes.
No, I agree with that. The fact that every officer in the room has not necessarily taken a live call, but there are other officers there that have taken 4 or 5 in that time. But I take your point.
Yes. Now, we don't need to go to it, but it was the Keeping People Safe 1994 Home Office guidance, wasn't it, that recommended that refresher training was carried out at intervals of no more than 12 months?
Yes, I believe it was.
Yes. In other words, you couldn't let more than 12 months go by before doing the next round of refresher training.
That was in the guidance, yes.
Now let's just look at your first witness statement, please. Page 24, paragraph 68. And you say, halfway through the third line from the bottom of the paragraph, on 15th September 2010, the board agreed a programme of FSG refresher training to take place every 2 years, with a full day's FSG training in year 1 and a CBT training package in year 2. Now, that's what you say there. Let's look at the minutes of that board meeting, that Lacknell House board meeting, if we can. But before we do that, there's a run-up, which is the earlier meeting in June of that year, 2010. LFB 30555208, please. This is the Lacknell House board meeting of the 22nd of June, 2010. You can see on page 1, halfway down the list, just below halfway down the list, you were in attendance,
Yep.
yes?
Yes.
And if we go to page 3, you can see paragraph 8.7, which says this: annual refresher training in line with FSC 1093 is being planned, and the expectation is that all control staff will receive a biannual one-day refresher with the training team and an on-watch package, including an e-learning package from fire safety and confirmation of learning. First, did you provide that update to the board?
Yes.
You did. So it looks from this meeting minute that the biannual refresher FSG training was going to be one full day with the training team and an on-watch package, which included e-learning from fire safety. That's basically what it says.
Yeah. So year 1 would be one day, and then year 2 would be the CBT or Yes, the e-learning package.
Yes. By biannual, did you mean biennial?
Yeah. Well, yes. So year 1 would be the full day. Year 2 would be a e-learning package. Year 3 would be a full day.
Yes.
Yes.
So you didn't mean that this was going to be delivered twice a year, but once every 2 years?
Yes.
Yes. And the confirmation of learning, what was that?
That was just feedback from staff, and they got a question set at the end just to confirm understanding.
Yes. Now then, let's go to the 15th of September 2010 minute for the Lackland House Board meeting that you refer to in your paragraph in your first witness statement at paragraph 68. And you can see there that on page 1 you were in attendance. Just wait for that to appear on your screen. There you are, 2/3 of the way down the list of attendees.
Yes.
If we go to page 2, paragraph 5.5. I'm sorry, that's paragraph 8, bottom of page 2. Control, Scott Hayward.
Yes.
And if you go to page 3, paragraph 8.7, you can see that it says annual refresher training in line with FSC 1093 is being planned, and the expectation is that all control staff will receive a biannual one-day refresher with the training team and an on-watch package, including an e-learning package from Fire Safety and confirmation of learning. Is that what you were referring to in your statement?
Yes.
And again, I imagine it was you who provided that update. Is that
Yes,
right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Was it intended that a full day's refresher training would always be delivered as to half by the fire safety team?
They would provide their presentation. Whether that took half a day, I don't think it did take half a day. I think it was an hour and a half with questions. But yes, they were to be part of that team, part of the delivery.
Right. And did that include, or was intended to include, role play at
Yes.
that stage? Yes. Was there any discussion at this meeting about the content of the refresher training?
Not that I can recall.
There's no mention in this update that the full day refresher training would take place in year 1 and CBT in year 2, is there?
No, but that was the understanding.
And in fact, the only place I think we see a reference to CBT is in the action plan attached to this meeting minute at page 8, if we can go to that. Do you agree? We'll just go to that and see if you agree. Page 8. Perhaps I can... Can I perhaps go to a different document? I've been asking you questions, I'm afraid. It's my fault, on the wrong minute. Can we go to LFB 3055192? There is the 15th of September 2010 minute. You are in attendance.
Yes.
If you go to 5.4 at the bottom of page 1, you can see it says FSG training has been reviewed to ensure it fully aligns with 1093, subject to recommendations made to CLG. All control staff have now received refresher training in FSG. Is that a reference to what we saw this morning?
I believe so, yes.
Namely, the large list of names attached to the email.
Yes.
We need to be brought in for refresher training
Yes.
in September 2010. Yes. And again, did you provide that update?
Me or Joanne, yes.
Yes. And you could see the reference this time to refresher training in FSG. Did that include role play?
I believe it did, yes.
Now, there's no mention here about CBT, as there wasn't in the June version. This time, this reference, I hope, is correct. There is a reference to CBT in the action plan attached to this minute, and that is at page 8, if we go to that. Where you can see row 12, FSG refresher training, ACSD, 15/9/10, 15th of September 2010. Initial training on FSG is now provided later in induction training. See that?
Yes.
And if you look at row 12, same date, refresher training provided to all control staff, consideration being given to how this is completed in future years. It may include computer-based training and step records. And there's the reference to CBT. Was the CBT training still only being considered at that meeting?
It looks to be the case there.
Yeah, so it wasn't already enshrined, as it were, in the training arrangements at that stage. It was still only under consideration.
Well, I think it was. I think it was being developed at this point. So we were going down the road of getting something, having our documentation put into an e-learning package.
Yes, but exactly. But it wasn't enshrined. It wasn't already rolled out.
No.
Can we then look at the next board meeting minute? This is 8th of November 2010 at LFB 3055213. And we can see that both you and Joanne Stibbards were present.
Yep.
And if we turn, please, to the bottom of the page, or scroll to the bottom of the page, we can see paragraph 4.6, action point 12, refresher training. The bulk of this is complete. Training is being completed for any staff on sick, etc., when the original training was carried out. A computer-based training CBT package for 2011 is now being formulated. Every other year, the full package will be used with a refresher CBT course in between. All training records have been transferred onto STEP. We saw that part yesterday. On this topic, was this the meeting where the biennial training package was put forward to the board? It looks as if it was. Is that the case?
I'm not sure we sold it as the biannual, but we talked about a 1 year full day and then the e-learning the following year.
Right. So the alternating
Yes.
approach, that was discussed, was it?
It was discussed at the board meeting. Whether it was this board meeting, I can't confirm, but it was discussed at a board meeting.
Right. Now, was it intended that in the years when there would be CBT only, if you like, still under formulation, as we can see, that would nonetheless still involve role play? Or was it discussed and agreed that it was only in the year when you had a full training plan, full training day, that there would be role play?
I think at this time, the full day would be the role play, and the e-learning package would have a confirmation of understanding questionnaire at the end. So it would be, staff on their own, not trainer-led.
And that would not involve role play?
No.
By definition?
Correct.
Was that structure, or proposed structure, approved by the Lakenhall House Board at this meeting?
I don't know whether it was approved. It's minuted there that's what we will be doing. I don't recall it being turned down at all.
No. To be fair to you, this is under the heading minutes of last meeting, so this looks like an update.
Yes.
Do you remember whether the update, which I think was given by you, was met with approval or disapproval?
It wasn't. I don't think it was met with any. I think I just gave an update, and right. that was it, I believe.
Was there any discussion at the meeting about whether what you were proposing there complied with or was consistent with national guidance?
Not specifically, but they would have expected it would comply with our gap analysis and 1093.
Right. But it wouldn't, would it? Because if you were only going to be rolling out CBT with no role play every other year, that would mean that more than 1 year had gone past without role play.
Well, it's a rolling year. I mean, that's why it was discussed to do it this particular way, because of the amount of staff that we needed to roll through. You'd be rolling through all those staff and then run that from the beginning again. So it seemed this is why the proposal was to do the e-learning package in the intervening years to allow for other training to take place. Because if we didn't, we'd be just continually doing that one type of training.
Yes, but the one type of training, the face-to-face training, if you like, which was the only one that had the role play, would only happen once every 2 years.
Yes.
For anybody.
Yes. So at this stage, this was agreed that this is what it would be.
Yes.
And the e-learning package didn't have role play in it.
Yes, and the point I'm putting to you is that structure, where role play was only every 2 years as opposed to annual, would not meet the national guidance, would it? Which required not less than 12 months to go by.
If explicit on the guidance, then no, but it was guidance, and we took it, the fact that we'll do this process because of the number of staff we had. Right.
You say because of the number of staff we had. Was that, bearing in mind the date, this is late 2010, was that the reasoning behind the decision to make this training part of a 2-year cycle?
No, I can't recall exactly. I mean, that would have been certainly one of the issues.
What were the others? What was the overall reasoning behind the decision to make this training part of a 2-year cycle?
I don't recall.
And I take it that you don't recall why it was thought appropriate to deliver CBT training without role play in the second year when it was required annually by the national guidance?
No, I can't answer that.
Now, at the time this update was provided to the Lackland House Board in November 2010, was it intended that the full day's training would involve a repeat of the initial training packages we looked at earlier? Remember those 6 training packages we saw before lunch? Or was the idea that they would be tailored to take account of the fact that control officers would have received the presentation, or were supposed to have done, the year before?
No, they would receive the presentation. The only one they wouldn't receive would be the behaviours one.
At this meeting, as you can see from the screen, action point 12, refresher training, the bulk of this is complete. Do you know why it was marked as complete, given that the refresher training was ongoing? And well, let me ask it.
No, I think it's saying there that refresher training, the bulk of the training is complete, not that it's actually complete. It's just that we've completed a good proportion of that training for the staff.
I see. So
it's not about we've completed the training.
I see what you mean. So that means the bulk of the staff have
Yes.
been refresher trained, not the bulk of the training.
Yes.
I see. Can we look at the Lackland Control Report of 2 years later, November 2012, with HOM *0001124? We can see that the coroner, at page 53, the coroner was told the following. We may want to start at the bottom of page 52 just to give you the full context. This is recommendation 4. With regard to fire survival guidance, training specifically, this should be reviewed to more fully reflect national guidance and current fire safety advice, and any specific issues arising from the gap analysis included in this report. This should include a review of training 4, etc. And then action 4.1 at the foot of your screen. Completed. Recruit CO FSG training was reviewed and updated in late 2009 and delivered from 2010. FSG training has been moved from week 5 of the old training course to week, if we turn the page, 9 of the new training course, and presumably is day 43, or thereabouts, for the new COs to give trainees more experience of live calls before they undertake FSG training. And then we see action 4.2 completed. A programme of refresher continuation training was implemented for all in-post COs between May and August 2010. Continuation training is provided annually to all control staff over a 2-year cycle, with year 1 being a trainer-led course and year 2 being a computer-based training course. The training includes A, role play. To ensure confirmation of learning was introduced into training. This allows all new and existing staff to experience a number of FSG call scenarios in a safe and supportive environment. B, inputs from fire safety officers covering aspects of building, design and construction, coupled with current fire safety advice to educate COs on fire behaviour and building types. C, FSG training has been extended to encompass whole day training. And then action 4.3 is supervisors, and we'll come back to that later. Now, the update there was the same as that provided to the Lackland House Board in November 2010, wasn't it? Essentially.
I believe so.
Now, let's just examine this. Before I do you accept, on the basis of what we've looked at so far, that the role play referred to in A is not stated only to be delivered in the year where there is a trainer-led course? In other words, it's not clear, is it, from A, that the role play is only every other year?
No, it says the training includes. It doesn't include all training there. So my interpretation, training includes role play, but and we do role play year one, but not during the e-learning package.
I mean, given the prominence of role play annually, which is accorded to it by the 1993 circular and the 1994 Home Office Keeping People Safe document, can you explain why Action 4.2, and particularly A, doesn't spell out to the reader, one of whom would have been the coroner, that role play was only every other year, not in accordance or inconsistently with the national guidance?
No, I cannot explain.
Should have done, shouldn't it?
Well, my interpretation is the fact that role play is included in training, but not for. But we don't do role play for the e-learning. We use another method of confirmation of training.
Now, those three elements there are elements I want to focus on as we then roll through the years. And I want to start by looking at the first intervening year, if I can. If we take 2010 as the first year, we then have the first CBT year as 2011. I'm going to ask you a little bit about that. Am I right first in thinking that, as I think you confirmed earlier, 2011 was going to be the first year that CBT training was going to be delivered?
That's correct.
Yes. But in fact, it's right, isn't it, that even in 2011, the CBT package was still under development?
That's correct.
And therefore, the training had to be delivered by staff accessing PowerPoint presentations.
That's correct.
Was the training that took place in 2011 the same or substantially similar to the training that was developed for the initial FSG training, which we had already looked at?
They would have been the same presentations.
Same?
Yes.
So that's the four.
But yes, sorry.
I
was going to say, but not trainer-led. It would have been them just looking through those presentations.
Exactly. And to be clear, they would be looking unled through four presentations: one, call handling techniques; two, building presentation; three, behaviour of fire presentation; and four, the fire survival guidance presentation.
That is my understanding, yes.
Yeah. And the staff would access it really by way of self-study.
Yes.
They'd go on a desktop at the Isle of Dogs, or Merton, perhaps,
Yes.
if they'd moved there. Yes. Now, in that year, presumably they did this in their own time, did they?
No, it had been done on watch during a quiet period.
Was any time
as
allocated?
Directed by the AOMs. It was on watch training, so it had been allocated by them.
The fault is in my question, in my own time on the watch.
Yes.
So,
Can I just ask each of you to let the other finish the remark or evidence, as a question or evidence, because I think transcribers find it quite difficult. There's a tendency to overlap.
yes, certainly, Mr. Chairman. For my part, it was an excess of enthusiasm at understanding the evidence. Can I ask you, was any time allocated to CROs to allow them to access the CBT package while on watch?
Well, the expectation would be that the AOMs would allocate them that time at a suitable time on the watch.
And how did that fit in with their work patterns?
Because they had a short shift. This is 2012, so they had a short shift at that point. So there would have been a 4-hour period over that short shift to which to allocate training.
How long or how much was allocated?
I can't remember. I'm not sure.
You said
An hour and a half.
Right. You said in your earlier answer this was 2012. To be clear, we're talking about 2011.
Oh, sorry, 2011. Yeah, so April 2011, we would have been in the new shift pattern. So the short shift would have been in place by then.
Right. And what about before April? Was any CBT rolled out? or PowerPoint presentations rolled out to control room operators?
I'm not sure whether there's any at that before that time, but if they would have been on that time, they're on the old shift pattern. They would have found some time, a quiet period, to allow staff to walk away and go and do that. Even if it was ones or twos, it didn't need to be a group because it was self-study.
Can we go to LFB 000028378? And if you go to page 2 in that email run, you'll see an email from Nicola O'Shea on the 24th of June 2011 to GVP all control staff about refresher training. And we know you saw this because if you look up, if we scroll up page 2, you'll see an email from you to Lindsay Turner and Joanne Stibbards, essentially forwarding this email on, in which you say, Lindsay, I would like to see a time constraint on this. We would want the watchers to have completed training by, in my view, the end of August. So we see you see that. Now, can we look at her email, which starts at the bottom of page 2? Just look down at that and then go over to page 3. And if we look halfway down page 3, there's a longish paragraph that starts OST training. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
And if you pick it up halfway through the paragraph, Nikki O'Shea says this: additionally, practice sheets have been designed to be used by supervisors for an interactive exercise at the end of the refresher course. The sheets will be stored by OST training, and supervisors will be given hands-on training and guidance before they conduct the exercises. The presentations and practice sheets form the required content of the refresher course. Staff are required to complete all sections and record the training in the following places. A, the spreadsheet currently being used to record all of training within the control found under Brigade Control / Operations Support Team / Training or Watches / Training Recording Sheet. Just pausing there, am I right in thinking that that is essentially a computer?
Yeah, it's a training drive.
It's a training drive. B, the course attendance sheet, which is located in the same place as the presentations. This would allow OST and OMs to easily check the progress of training, and if any assistance is required to complete the training by OST. There is also a feedback document on the site which will be explained to supervisors by OST trainers during their hands-on session. And then she identifies the content of the course, and we can see the first 4 bullet points are the first 4, or are the 4 presentations that we discussed earlier, aren't they?
Yes.
Now, what was the interactive exercise that she refers to in the first of the paragraphs I read to you?
I presume that would be the call practice.
The call practice, what's that?
Call practice, so scripts. So talking through FSG scripts by the look of it. If you look at the survival RIF.
That wouldn't be part of the CBT, though, would it?
Well, it appears that what they've done, rather than as a confirmation of understanding, they've pulled the RIF up. They've got a call practice script, and they walk through the script while going through the RIF, and that would be the confirmation of understanding, being able to ask questions.
Is the idea here, reading that paragraph as a whole, which starts OST training, that control room operators could access these presentations on their own and just look through them, but could also do it as part of a team?
Yes.
And have role play as part of that? Using as an interactive exercise?
They could do, yes.
Did they?
I can't remember.
Who would decide whether on a particular day there should be an interactive exercise?
It's on watch training, so it'll be decided by the operations manager and the AOM to decide what training takes place on watch.
And was there any supervision exercised by you to make sure that as much interaction as possible was being?
Not personally by me, no.
Why is that?
Because I had a senior operations manager training and a training team to be able to do that.
And do you know, to the best of your knowledge, whether that was done?
Not that far back, no. But I'd like to think it was. A lot of work was done to get this where it was.
Right. Now, if we scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see that the course content is identified. We looked at the first 4 asterisks a little bit earlier. There's then Supervisor Fire Survival Guidance, which was new, and then there's something called Call Practice. Were you referring to that?
Yes.
The 4 scripts, NB, these will be given to supervisors individually by OST training. Is that what you were referring to as the interactive exercise?
I believe so, yes.
I see. But that would be interactive using the CBT package or apart from the CBT package?
Using the CBT package and the RIF, so it looks like it's a confirmation of understanding.
Right.
So they'd go through the presentations. They would then pull up the survival RIF, get the scripts up, and work through the scripts and using the RIF to guide them through.
Was there any assessment done by the supervisors or by the SOM in charge of those exercises?
What, for the individuals?
Yes.
Well, that had been done by the supervisors on watch.
But was it assessed?
What, by?
By the supervisors on watch. Was the performance of the CROs in the call practice, which was scripted, assessed by the supervisors on watch?
I would suggest not if they're talking for the RIF, because it's already in front of them.
So this is simply practicing what's in the RIF, is it?
It's a confirmation of understanding, yes.
A confirmation of understanding. Was there any feedback ever offered either to the SOMs or to you about those exercises?
Feedback was we introduced a feedback system so that staff who've done the courses could feedback to OST. There was a standard form created.
Now, we can see that you respond to this email as I showed you. If you go up the email chain, please, to page 2, top of page 2. You say, as I've shown you, I would like to see a time constraint on this. We would want the watches to have completed training by, in my view, the end of August. Does that explain what is said in the assurance review that we saw earlier about training being completed in 2011 between July and September? Do you remember I showed you that?
You did show me that. I don't know. I mean, I think we were looking at the time constraints here as because we were preparing to move into Merton, so there'd been a lot of work that we needed to prepare before the move.
Now, that is the 2011 course content. Can I then turn to the question of delivery of that content in 2011? Can we go to your second witness statement, please, at page 12, paragraph 64? The question at 6B is, please explain how it was ensured that staff accessed the PowerPoint presentations during 2011, whether staff were audited and by whom, whether any training records were created, and please exhibit copies of the same. Your answer is, it is my understanding that OST notified staff of where they could access the PowerPoint training presentation and that supervisors who were on watch were responsible for ensuring that the training was completed. Did you monitor whether the training was completed by staff?
Not personally, no.
Why is that?
Because I was busy doing other things and I delegated that role down to the SOM training.
Right. Did you monitor how the SOM was overseeing that training being completed by staff?
No, but I expected if there were issues that the SOM would report to me.
I see. So that's reporting again by exception?
Yes.
I see. Were you ever sent any kind of report or update or message by your supervisors as to how it was going?
Possibly, but I don't recall.
Did you ever look at the training records, such as those that are referred to by Nicola O'Shea in her June email we've just been looking at?
I have seen the training records, but not, not specifically to look at this particular item.
Right. Did you ever dip into them just to spot check?
I don't believe I did back then, no.
And did you receive any feedback on the training exercises, and in particular, I call it role play, but the interactive element, the call scripts?
Not that I recall.
Now, if we go to your first statement, please, we can see paragraph 74 at page 26. And this is a paragraph we're going to come to a number of times, Mr. Hayward. It is a table, as you say, of FSG training during 2011 to 2017. If we look at it, we can see that for 2011, there were 121 staff, of whom 114 were trained, which accounted for 94%. Is that a figure that you were aware of at the time, or did you only learn that figure when you prepared this statement?
When I prepared the statement.
Why did you not know that at the time?
Because I didn't recall. I had to go through the training records.
Did you not monitor at least the raw numbers for take-up?
At the time, possibly, but no, I wouldn't remember it from back then.
No. At the time, did you have a system whereby you would regularly calculate or be asked for calculations as to the take-up?
No.
Why is that?
Again, because if there was if it wasn't being done, I'd be notified.
Right.
And at this time now, there were other priorities which took me away from doing that specifically.
Do you know how such a relatively good turnout for that training was achieved in that year?
Yes, we took the staff. I believe we took the staff off.
You took the staff off watch?
Yes.
Could you just explain that a little bit more for me?
Well, so post-April, they would have done it in the 4-hour slot that were allocated to them. So from April, we're in a new shift pattern.
Right. Did you notice at the time any change in the uptake after April 2011 and the change in the shift patterns compared with the uptake before April?
No, I don't recall.
Is it, I don't want you to speculate if you don't know, but is it possible that the reason why there was 94% uptake in 2011 was that one-third of that year, or during one-third of that year, you were on the old shift pattern?
Not necessarily, no.
No.
I mean, because the old shift pattern, whilst the staffing was 24, our abstraction rate, which is those that are on leave, etc., would take us down to 16, and 2 of the AOMs would be operating out of Stratford at that time. So in actual fact, in the control room, there'd have been 14 members of staff, and 2 over at Stratford. So it wouldn't have affected the fact that we had more staff, or more staff available potentially, prior to the watch change to the new shift pattern. So no, I don't think there'll be an impact there.
After the new shift pattern came in April 2011, was it possible to continue to take and train the staff off watch?
Well, the idea with the new shift pattern was the 4-hour crossover, which gave us 4 hours of the most staff there, so 20 staff. So yes, you could take staff off to do that.
And what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is how such a good turnout for 2011 is explicable, at least by reference to later years. But you got 94% in 2011. Given that you had the shift change 1/3 of the way through that year, are you able to explain why, nonetheless, you had 94%?
I can't. No, I don't recall.
I don't know. Can I then ask you some questions about the role play in 2011? If we go to page 26 of your first statement at paragraph 75, the very next paragraph, you say, in 2011, 94% of all available staff accessed a PowerPoint presentation, and the training team validated this training with a role play exercise. And then you exhibit a number of documents. As explained above, this was not the active role play that was envisaged by the board. Indeed, and I think you've explained this, but is role play there the call scripts that we've seen referred to in the email we looked at earlier?
They could have been utilised that way, yes.
How is it that the training was validated by role play if that wasn't part of the intended plan for the training programme for that year, given that it was an intervening CBT or intended CBT?
Sort for 2011.
Yes.
Okay, so as it states there, it's not the active role play, it was the obviously walking through the scripts and the riff.
Right. So to be clear, in 2011, there wasn't the role play that was envisaged
No.
by the national guidance, but there was a form of interaction, namely the call scripts that we've seen referred to in the earlier email.
Yes, so this is the confirmation of understanding then.
Right. And that was done alongside the PowerPoint,
Yes,
before PowerPoint presentations.
yes.
Yes. If you go back a page, if you go to your second statement, page 14, this is in answer to a question at page 14, paragraph 73. The question is, please explain the assessment process that was intended to be implemented, whether it was implemented, and if not, why not? This is in relation to fire survival guidance training in paragraph 67 of your first statement. And you say this in paragraph 73, from 2012, the training team changed the role play element of the assessment process to a more passive exercise, requiring staff to listen to FSG calls and discuss the positive and negative aspects of each call. Som Turner approved the change to the assessment process. Now, are you able to help us? Was the role play exercise changed to a more passive exercise in 2011 or 2012?
Well, 2012 would have been the full day, so that was when the active role play should have taken place. So it's clear from my understanding that in 2012 they didn't do active role play, but turned it into passive role play.
So, thus far, have I got this right? In 2010, you had year one full day's training, active role play.
Yes.
2011 was supposed to be CBT, but wasn't. It was the four PowerPoint presentations, but with call scripts.
Yes.
And that's the off year, if you like. And
Yes.
2012 was the on year, full training, but in that year, that role play element was made more passive.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I want to see if I can identify with greater precision the time of the change. But before I do that, you say SOM Turner approved the change to the assessment process. Why did the approval for that change not lie with you, given that you had overall responsibility for the delivery?
I was not aware until I was asked for an update that actually they changed it to passive role play. So I was asked by AC Brown, I believe, to provide an update. Or it may have been Tom Davis from legal to provide an update.
When was that?
I don't recall the exact time or date.
And was that after 2012?
I believe it was just after 2012, yeah.
So just after 2012?
Yeah. So we'd have moved into Merton by then.
Well, you moved into Merton in the spring of 2011, I think you've told us.
No, February 2012.
February 2012, sorry,
yes.
you're quite right. I see that, and you think that it was around about that time?
I believe so.
Now, can we then look at LFB 00111432, please? Can we go to page 2 in this email run? This is an email from Chris Sharp to you on the 16th of May 2011. Copy to Lindsay Turner and Nicola O'Shea. Subject: fire survival refresher courses. Scott, as per our conversation late last week, here is an outline of the proposed refresher training for fire survival calls. The original intention was to provide computer-based training in order that operators could use the package themselves, rather than being reliant on a formal session. However, access to the facilities to provide us assistance and support to construct the packages is not available due to other commitments in the CBT department, so we've amended our approach to this training. And then there are 2 bullet points. I'll just read them to you. A PowerPoint package or Word document based on a Q&A session. This will include links to the RIF in particular places to get operators more familiar with the RIF and how to quickly locate the information they need in a real FS situation. A video consisting of 2 scenarios, possibly 3, enacted by volunteers to play the role of a control room operator taking an FS call, or FS calls. Version 1, an ideal or closest to FS call. Version 2, an FS call that is successful but not as effective as it could be. The idea would be that operators would observe the ideal film and comment on it, then view the less than perfect tape for more comments. The reason we run the best call first is to set standards and use this as reinforcement of the Q&A session. We anticipate that this 2-part training will be ready for operator use by the end of June, subject to no technical issues. As we are limited in accommodation, room S2 would be available, but work needs to be done to tidy it up and make it a more suitable work area. Now, just looking at that, it's right to think that the proposal here put forward by Chris Sharp did not include a role-play exercise, but simply listening to or watching a video.
Yeah, but this is the CBT, so this is the intervening year. So the intention never was to run a full active role play at this stage. It was really to read scripts and go through. So what she's proposing is a little bit more than that. So I don't see it as particularly wrong what she's proposing.
No, it's the background for what you then say by way of response. If we go to page 1, we can see that you respond to her. For the foot of page 1, on the next day, 17th of May 2011 at 8:26. At 5:30 in the morning, it looks like.
Yes.
And copy to Lindsay Turner and Joanne Stibbards. And if we go to page 2, you can see the text of the message. Many thanks for the update. We haven't really got any scope to delay the training. We need to be proactive to ensure that the refresher training takes place as stated. Do we intend to provide any assessment to confirm understanding, a role-play call, for example? If not, please consider.
Sorry, could I just... I can't see all of that screen.
Really?
Oh, right. Can you not? It's on our public screen. If you haven't got it on your screen...
What have you got at the top of your screen, Mr. Hayward?
I've got the bottom of my email, and then the Chris Sharp to me. Is that what we're saying? Many thanks for the... Sorry.
Yes.
My mistake.
No,
I was looking at the bottom still. My apologies.
Not at all. I was probably going a little bit too quickly. Let's take it more slowly. This is your email, and what I wanted to focus on was perhaps the second paragraph, where you asked the question, do we intend to provide any assessment to confirm understanding, a role-play call, for example? If not, please consider. Now, why did you want a role-play call to be used as part of an assessment there, given, as you say rightly, this was an off year, this was 2011?
But because she's proposed going through a process of making videos and that, and not an easier, that's the wrong term, but a simpler, more effective way, in my view, would be to do a role play, for example, rather than try and create videos. So it was just an alternative.
I see.
I wasn't. You know, I thought our idea was had good merit, but because of the time constraints were on, because we were moving, I thought a role play would be a better and easier to implement process.
And then if we look at LFB 30588087, we see, if you go to page 2, bottom email in the chain, an email 27th of May 2011 from Chris Sharp to you and to Lindsay Turner, copied to Joe Smith. And over on the top of page 3, she says, currently the procedure for fire survival is in a state of change. with the anticipated addition of a new ITC FSG for Command Unit and Station Manager. And then in the next paragraph she says, as you know, we intend to produce a video package of mock fire survival calls for control staff to comment on as part of the fire survival refresher training. Nikki has done a lot of work working on the script and assessment sheets for the video. The intention is to pull resources together to film the role play as soon after 16th as possible. I'm asking permission to organise a filming day and to include Natalie Bagnall and Amelia Reynolds to help, as they were both involved in the last film session. Now, you respond to that the same day. If we look at the next email up, and you say this, if you go back to page 2, foot of the page, you say, I disagree, we've already adopted this procedure, and there's something about high-rise. And then, I do not want our refresher training delayed for any reason, and would want it to follow the proposed training recommended in FSC 1093, including our own additions. We've made assurances to the National Board that this is our proposed action and it is supported by them. Any issues, back to the senior managers soonest. Would you have expected Chris Sharp to discuss with you any major changes to the training packages?
No, I'd think she would discuss it with Lindsay, who would then discuss it with me.
When you say you would want it to follow the proposed training recommended in FSC 1093, was that the role play exercise?
Yes.
In the 1993 circular? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And then we can see Lindsay Turner responds to your email again on the same day, 27th of May, in the next email up, this time copying only Joe Smith. If we scroll up page 2, please. And if you look at the second paragraph, she says, whilst the video idea is a good one, I'm not sure it will demonstrate. Oh dear. Thank you. Whilst the video idea is a good one, I'm not sure it will demonstrate good practice amongst our staff. It will not test staff if they are answering questions about how good or bad a call was in a group. Not only that, but we are already into June and we still do not have a package available to deliver our annual refresher training. And then she goes on, a half day would suffice.
I think this is me, isn't it, to Lindsay?
Yes, I think what's happened here is that we've jumped an email. I need to show you yours to her, and there was some leaping about, which I think has put me into the next document. Could we scroll down, please, to the bottom of page 1? Hi, Scott and Joanne. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Ideally, we would have got together to talk this through face-to-face, but because we are all off at different times over the next week, and then it sort of trails away. And if we go to the top of page 2, this is how I see this, and then you can let me know if I'm way off. My understanding is that we will be providing refresher training to staff on FSG, and that this is ideally this ideally would have been CBT, but because they cannot provide this at this time, our trainers are putting together a PPT, and FS are working on a PPT as well. Attached is R1, which is not complete yet. My understanding is that we are doing our training to 1093, but this is also enhanced by the changes we've made with the new RIF, which is more in-depth. Is this right? If we don't do it this way, we will not be refreshing to the same level as we did in their initial training and update training when the RIF changed. At this time, we are still waiting for the FS PPT. The video clips that Chris is suggesting are to replace roleplay, which wasn't in the initial requirement for refresher, but is added because it was deemed useful in the previous training. If we had used CBT, there would not have been roleplay, but thought we were keen to keep this in, ? Also, if we had used CBT, there would not necessarily have been anyone evaluating them, but I suggest that this is done by their AOM/OM in a similar way to call coach. If all the and then the last paragraph, if all the above is completely wrong, then we need to let Chris know ASAP so she can make changes to the way the refresher training is going to be done. Scott, if we are going with doing the film clips, are you happy for Amelia/Natalie to help with this? Now, it's quite a chunk of text, that. first of all, Lindsay Turner, that's SOM Turner.
It is indeed.
Is the long and the short of all of this that the CBT couldn't be delivered, but that would never have included roleplay anyway, and now what is envisaged is a PowerPoint which did include an element of roleplay?
Yes.
Yes. And would it be fair to say that SOM Turner was in support of changing the roleplay exercise for the videos suggested by Chris Sharp?
She was supporting the videos, yes.
And she was asking you for your approval?
Yes.
Now, thank you. That's helped cut through that. Now, you then respond to SOM Turner at the top of this email chain in the email that I started showing you in error, and you rightly pointed out was yours. Lindsay, having considered yours and OST's concerns over the proposed training package, I suggest we get back to basics. Whilst the video idea is a good one, I'm not sure it will demonstrate good practice amongst our staff. It will not test staff if they are answering questions about how good or bad a call was in a group. Not only that, but we're already into June and still do not have a package available to deliver our annual refresher training. In reality, the initial training package delivered last year was based on the training proposed in 1093 with enhancements. I'm keen, this is important, I'm keen to continue with role play for staff to confirm understanding as stated in 1093. I suggest we provide a reduced package for the refresher course followed by a role play session. A half day would suffice, including all relevant previous teaching, as well as the changes that have been introduced over the past 12 months, including Policy 155. Just pausing there. Policy 155, was that draft 155?
Yes, that was for the become 790.
It became 790 the following year. And you go on. It will simplify the taking for OST as the training document, for OST, as the training documentation is already there. They will only require sorting out some FSG type calls and could use short shift staff to assist with this, or those being taught could act as callers. I suggest at least one OST member support the training to ensure consistency in training and role play. Even with CBT, I would still like a form of confirmation of understanding. This will be considered in any coroner's hearings when delivering our post-action training. It's not enough that we communicate one way with our staff and expect them to take it all on board. I suggest that we and OST need to know that the staff understands. I appreciate all the work that's been done to introduce this refresher training and the different methods in which it can be delivered, but it needs to reflect national policy and it needs to be delivered now. And you go on, we can consider our options over the next 9 months whilst we're preparing for the full day's training this time next year, and hopefully we will have a package prepared for every year. Views please as soon as possible so that we can agree the way forward, ? Now, again, there's a lengthy chunk of text, but to summarise, am I right that you were telling SOM Turner that the role-play exercise should stay as an active role-play exercise, not a video, because a video would not demonstrate or necessarily demonstrate good practice?
Correct.
Yes. And you wanted to ensure that staff understood how to take an FSG call?
Yes.
Yes. What happened as a result of your sending that email?
We didn't do the videos. We used the existing training packages that we used because we didn't have CBT. But I believe that we used the scripts and it wasn't done as active role play. But as I said, I think it was done talking through the riff as opposed to doing active role play, I believe, from that time.
And did you receive any comments back from SOM Turner?
I don't recall. I expect I would have done. The views, please, were to all those CC'd in. So we obviously had a further discussion, but I'm not sure what the feedback was.
Right. So in a nutshell, did this proposal simply run into the sand, and you continued with the call scripts as the interactive element?
Yeah, because I think it was the time. Obviously, I'm highlighting there the fact we hadn't got a package together yet. We were expecting the CBT package to be in place, and we were working to try and get that done. It was clear that wasn't going to happen. So, we had a time frame, but we had no package. So we had to act quickly to put a package together which would satisfy the requirements. I believe at this stage we used, as I said, the scripts that were created, and we used a riff and not active role play But then obviously I wanted role play, active role play from then on.
I see. So, in and for the rest of 2011, so far as refresher training was concerned, the role play element remained the call scripts and the use of the riff in the way we've already discussed.
I believe so. That's my understanding at that time.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much. I think it's time we had a short break. Mr. Hayward, we'll stop now. We'll resume at 3:30, please.
Thank you, sir.
No talking to anyone.
No, of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. 3:30 then, please. Would you ask Mr. Hayward to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, Mr. Hayward.
I'm indeed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett, when you're ready.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. 2012, training in 2012. Can we start with a further change to role play and the duration question? I think it's right, isn't it, that in 2012, the training that should have been given was a full day of refresher training with fire safety input and role play exercise.
That's correct.
Yes. Can we go to your first statement, please? Page 26, paragraph 76. And you say there, in 2012 to 13, trainers and a fire safety officer provided FSG training during the 4-hour training slot with the short shift to 89%, 81 of all available staff. This was not the duration intended by the board. Now, you don't mention there the role play training in that paragraph. Was there role play training actually carried out in 2012?
Yes, but it was passive role play, if I remember rightly.
And that's the passive role play that we saw referred to by Jo Smith in her statement?
Yes.
Did you check at the time to see that role play was being carried out as part of that on-year training?
No, I became aware of it when I was asked to provide an update to the board.
When was that? Again, was that around the 2012 mark?
2012, 2013 mark, yeah.
Right. And what did you do when you discovered that role play was not being carried out, or rather was being carried out in a passive way?
I directed the senior operations manager to instigate active role play in accordance with the as discussed at the board.
Can we look at your first statement of paragraph 69, please, on page 24, 2 pages earlier? You say there, during the full day's FSG training, it was intended that staff members should undertake role play exercises. I believe that active role play, i.e. role play in which staff members took part, was used in 2010. However, during the course of the Lacknell House fire inquests, when the LFB was providing information to the coroner, I was asked to clarify a number of aspects of the FSG training, including its duration and composition. Having confirmed the position with the members of my team who were responsible for the training, it transpired that the active role play element of the training had been stopped. Instead, following feedback from staff, it appears that it was decided that the trainers would instead record mock FSG calls displaying good and bad, I should say bad.
Yes, it should say bad.
Practice, which were played to staff for them to discuss. I believe that this decision must have been taken by Vic Bagnall, who was then the senior operations manager leading the OST. I questioned this decision in an email to Vic Bagnall on 7th of February 2013. Now then, just to confirm this, are you saying here that it was only on or around the 6th, 7th of February 2013, during the Lacknell House inquest hearings themselves, that you first discovered that the role play exercise that was meant to have been delivered as part of the refresher FSG training in 2012 had been changed to a passive role play exercise?
Correct.
Can you explain why you didn't know that before then?
Because I wasn't informed that there was a change, and the training role play was in the training, it just wasn't the training that was envisaged. So my understanding was it was active role play in accordance with the direction that we gave.
Right.
In actual fact, that was changed to passive role play, but I wasn't made aware of that.
Right. I think you would accept that you ought to have been made aware of that.
Yes.
And who at the time was responsible for making you aware of that? Who did not?
That had been Son Bagnall.
Now, let's be clear. Jo Smith left for the CFOA on secondment in September 2012.
Yes, September 2012.
And at that stage, September 2012, by then, who was in charge of training and ensuring in particular that role play was carried out?
I'm not quite sure the exact timings, but Som Turner was still with us, but at some stage during that year she was seconded out of control and moved into projects because of a life-changing illness.
Right. Who was... who, before September 2012, when Joe Smith left, I should ask you first. When in 2012 did SOM Turner leave on secondment?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, it was a move from control to headquarters. I'm not exactly sure of the exact time.
Right. Is it right that when Joe Smith was seconded to the CFOA in September 2012, OM Bagnall became SOM, acting SOM Bagnall?
Yes.
He essentially took her role, but not her command post, if you like, her rank.
He took her rank, yes.
He took her rank.
Yes.
Who was responsible during 2012 at any time for bringing to your attention the fact that the role play intended as part of the full day's training had been downgraded to passive?
So that'd been the SOM training, so either Lindsay Turner or Vic Bagnall.
And what about Joe Smith?
Which she wasn't responsible for training at that point.
Right. Now, you say there that the decision must have been taken by Vic Bagnall, but I think you also accept that this is a decision that was for you to make, with the person ultimately responsible
Yes.
for training.
So what I'm saying there is the fact that obviously OST asked that person agreed, but it didn't come to me.
At that stage, did an alarm bell ring with you that perhaps your methods of supervision and monitoring the SOMs responsible for training had not been quite as hands-on and as effective as it should have been?
I didn't think that at the time. I put trust in my senior operations managers because I can't do it all, and what was going on at that time, I needed to rely on my senior operations managers to follow through what they were tasked to do. So no, I don't feel that I didn't do enough or monitor enough. I gave direction to report exceptions if there was any, because I was out and about all the time. So, I needed to rely on those to carry out those tasks.
But this was an exception, wasn't it? The downgrading to passive.
It was an exception, but it wasn't reported to me.
Exactly, and therefore, because it wasn't reported as an exception, that was a failure in the reporting system.
Yes.
And did you investigate with Vic Bagnall why it was that
Yes,
there had
I
been
did.
a failure, and what was the upshot?
Well, he responded with an email first of all, talking about staff and the fact they didn't see that active role play worked. I spoke to him face to face, referenced it as well. I thought active role play was a good method of training. I've used it in a previous role, and I thought it worked very well. And I instructed him to ensure that it was done in the future.
And was it really a case of the control room staff saying, "We don't like it, can we stop doing it?" And
I think they got embarrassed by it because obviously it can highlight their shortfalls maybe, or but that's the environment to do it in my view. It can turn out that you've made a mistake, but that's where to make a mistake. And active role play is an effective, in my opinion, an effective way of confirmation of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you.
Looking down the same page to paragraph 70, please, if we can scroll down to that. You say there, in addition, whilst the board intended that control officers would receive a full day's package of FSG training, it became apparent to me when I was querying the nature of the FSG training in February 2013 that in 2012, when full training was due to take place, this training was actually delivered in about 4 hours. This would have taken place during the 4-hour short shift. The training that was delivered in 2010 was a full day. Now, are you saying here that you were unaware that the full day's training had been reduced to 4 hours, or crammed in perhaps to 4 hours in 2012?
Yeah, well, I mean, my understanding is, having considered this, is the fact that because we introduced a new shift pattern and the 4-hour training slot was allocated for training, training used that opportunity to be able to deliver that training. And whilst we said that it was a full day's training, because there was less staff on the course, then no real element was lost. Although in reality, we said we'd give a full day, and we didn't give that full day as was agreed. So again, I went back but I can understand why they did what they did, because as part of that shift pattern, we allocated that to training.
Now, you say it became apparent to you when you were querying the nature of the FSG training in 2013.
Yes.
Was that about the same time that you discovered the role play problem?
Yes, it was all an update to the board.
And again, you were unaware of that before then?
I was, yeah.
And again, was that because Vic Bagnall did not inform you of it?
Well, I think he didn't inform me of it, but equally, as I've already stated, I think that because with the new shift pattern was new and we'd allocated this 4 hours, I think they naturally just sat it into that 4-hour period. It was achieved in that 4-hour period, although that wasn't what we told the board, and we needed to go back to the day.
Can we go to page 18 of this statement, please, and look at paragraph 53? So it's at the foot of your screen. You say this: as was intended, and I just focus on those words, as was intended when the new shift system was implemented in 2011, trainer-led training took place within the short shift. In the period between April 2011 and April 2014, there was a 4-hour overlap between the two shifts. The effect of this was that I could release staff from training whilst maintaining service delivery, although this did depend on sickness and other leave. Now, you say, as was intended when the new shift system was implemented in 2011. When was the decision made to change the training sessions to a 4-hour training slot?
Around that time that I was made aware of it.
So you were made aware of it?
You mean the general 4-hour training slot?
Well, when was the decision made to change the training sessions to a 4-hour training slot?
It was part of the proposals with fire control, and this was one of the shift patterns that was proposed by all FRSs and DCLG as part of that programme. And although the programme was, as I said, cancelled, LFB still wanted to pursue changes within Brigade, and one of those was the shift pattern, and this is the shift pattern that was proposed to the unions, which they accepted.
All right.
And as part of that was a 4-hour overlap to allow for training.
That was my next question.
Yes.
When that 4-hour overlap was instituted, was it specifically intended that it would be used for training?
Yes, it was.
Next question: when that was decided, who was it who decided that 4-hour overlap would be used for the FSG refresher training, which would otherwise ordinarily take a day?
So it would have been Son Bagnall.
Right, and that's not something he told you about until he revealed it to you in February 2013.
Correct.
During the Lacknell House inquest.
Yes.
Yes. Now, do you know how he intended that the staff were going to receive what was meant to be a full day's training during 4 hours?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, the full day package, if I know we've talked about it's 5 hours or whatever, but in reality, the training normally started around 9 o'clock. There'd be a break, and lunch. What they did it in the 4-hour slot straight through with one break. So the same training was delivered. It was just the fact that it didn't last the full day, and there was obviously less staff that they needed to train as well, which gave them some time back rather than more than 10 or 12 people. It had just been 3 or 4.
If it wasn't interactive, or the interaction was only passive because the role play was passive, how would the reduction in the numbers of staff to be trained have enabled you to reduce the time?
Because obviously, if you're doing active role play, which is what was envisaged, then obviously there'll be two people doing it, and then you swap over. With the passive role play, it would be playing the calls and then interaction between that small group and the trainer about good and bad calls. So that the time is reduced because you're not doing the active part of it.
I see. So in a nutshell, is it that you took a full day with frills, as it were, took out the frills and managed to compress the full day into a 4-hour slot?
I'm not sure frills is the correct
No, it's
correct
perhaps an
term.
unfortunate use of expression, but comfort breaks and lunch and things like that.
Yes.
And did you ask him, or did you investigate whether there was any compromise to the integrity of the full-day training package?
I did.
You did?
Yes, I did. And the feedback I got was there was no compromise.
And you trusted that, did you?
I did trust that, yeah.
Can we go to LFB 000058087? This is an email we looked at earlier, which was your back to basics email.
Yep.
The one we looked at twice. And I've read it all to you, so I won't read it again. But you'll recall at the very top of the email, you refer to OST's concerns over the proposed training package. What were those concerns?
I don't recall. I think I don't recall.
And although this is in the context of PowerPoint training in an off year, to call it that, you suggested a half day's training package for the refresher course, and you said
Yes.
that would suffice. Why did you think it would suffice?
Because the CBT package would only be a couple of hours. So a half day. I mean, I wasn't making any hard and fast decisions. I was just making suggestions about how we could do it. It may have taken a bit longer, or I would suggest probably a little bit shorter. So it was just ideas out there to help jumpstart some fresher ideas that were first proposed, rather than go through a process of making videos and the like.
Right. In the third paragraph there, you say you're keen to continue with role play. And in the third line, you suggest we would provide a reduced package for the refresher course, followed by a role play session. Was that suggestion aimed at the putative CBT or PowerPoint year 2011 only, or was it aimed at the following year as well, the full package?
This bit was talking about the interims to the CBT, or in the absence of the CBT package, but active role play should have been delivered for the full days anyway.
Yes, really what I'm trying to get at was whether your suggestion there for a reduction in the refresher course to a half day, which you say would suffice, was just for 2011.
Yes, this is just because we didn't have the CBT package available.
So we were not to take from that email that this was going to be an enduring suggestion, which would also cover the on years, 2012, 2014, 2016.
No, it was not.
Can we then look at the emails that transpired in February 2013, from which you gain your recollection? Before I take you to that, can I show you paragraph 71 of your first statement by way of a run-up? At page 24, you say, at the very foot of page 24, in the emails I exchanged on 6th and 7th, paragraph 71, in the emails I exchanged on 6th and 7th February 2013 with members of the OST, Chris Sharp and Vic Bagnall set out an explanation as to why the duration of the training had been changed. In summary, Chris Sharp, now deceased, confirmed that a full day's training took place, I should say, in 2010, but that to facilitate this, staff were detached from duty. This meant that they did not form part of the minimum contingent required to operate the control room. Chris Sharp indicated that there was a management decision that refresher training should take place during the short shift to prevent staff from being detached from duty. I do not know who took that decision, but it may have been Vic Bagnall. Do you know when that decision was made?
I do not.
Was it made after the decision that we've just looked at in May 2011? Presumably it was.
I presume so, yes.
And again, why did you not have oversight of who took that decision?
Because I wasn't informed.
So why were you not included in a management decision about the length of training, particularly where it affected what was agreed at the Lackland House Board?
No, I don't disagree, but I wasn't informed.
Right. And now let's look at the emails. We start at LFB 001222840. And let's take this slowly. If we look first at page 3, at the very foot of that page, we can see an email from you to Chris Sharp, Nicola O'Shea, copied to Vic Bagnall, of the 6th of February 2013, at 14:56. And the subject is FW, forward, control report, importance high, sensitivity confidential. And you say further traffic, and that's in blue. This is the bottom email in the string, so we're jumping in a sense, in the middle of the conversation. But am I right that you were passing on questions which had been posed by Thomas Davis from LFB Legal Services? I can show you the precursor email to that if you like.
In which case, if the precursor emails are saying that, then yes.
Well, let's put this beyond any doubt. Can we leave this on the screen, if we may, please, and have up LFB 000060872. This is on the right-hand side, and we need to look at page 3 of that email run, please. On the right-hand side, page 3, this is Tom Davis's email to you on the 6th of February with some questions. And he says, thanks for everything yesterday. A couple of issues have been raised which we'll need answers to in case the coroner wants to question any of these points. And there are 2 questions there set out. Whether the supervisor training, if needed, should be rolled out to all staff. And then the second question, we need some clarity about what refresher training takes place. Is it every other year all day with role play and fire safety officers, and the other year computer-based on watch? I'm afraid we still aren't clear about the situation. We've told the coroner in the report, and just to pause there, that was the LFB's control report of November 2012 that we've been looking at. We've told the coroner in the report that it is full-day training. If it isn't, we need to have a detailed answer why we've modified this position and precisely what the position retraining is now. We think training is one of the areas that the coroner and the other parties are going to focus on, so the more information we have, the stronger our stance will be. Happy to chat, but I can also get written answers so that I can provide to our counsel as well. Now, if you look at the response, if you go to the left-hand side, if we can go back to that email, and if we can go back to that email and then scroll down, please, to the next page. In answer to the question about the clarity about what refresher training takes place, that's in the middle of the page, and you can see that the answer in red, which comes from Nikki O'Shea, a management decision was made that trainers and an FS officer would provide training every other year. As with this year, in between, staff will access the information we've made available, which we then validate with role play. Next year, staff will access the Knowledge Centre and complete the CBT packages. Just to confirm, the first FSG training in 2010 was a full day's training. 2011, staff access PowerPoint presentations and we validated with role play. 2012, trainers and an FS officer provided half a day's training. 2013, staff will complete the online CBT packages. And then if you look a little bit lower down, there's a further red comment. It was a management decision that refresher training did not need to be a full day's training and could take place from 1,400 hours to 1,800 hours. This was to utilise the afternoon short shift and to prevent staff from being DD, that means detached from detail, from watch. And then you query that in blue. Do you see?
Yes.
You say, yes, but why? Yes, but why? Did we refine the training to enable us to deliver the day's training in 4 hours? Are the staff getting the same training they received when we use the full day? Is it more intense, for example? Can you be a little more specific, please? Now, just pausing there, presumably you didn't know any of that, which is why you were asking these questions.
Correct.
And the response you get in red is this. When we started the training in 2010, the training itself took 7 hours, including a lunch break. It was agreed that a full day was required and staff were DD from watch to allow this to happen. We were not able to DD people for the current training, therefore were directed by management to use the slot between 1,400 and 1,800 hours to complete it. There is not enough staff on duty from 0800 hours to 1,400 hours to allow training to take place before 1,400 hours. The training that we've just conducted has not changed from the initial training in 2010, i.e. the content of the presentations. The difference in the training we've just completed this time included a brief discussion on difficult calls compared with the 1 hour 30 minutes covered in the original training. Also, instead of staff completing individual role play, we recorded mock calls and staff listened and assessed the content of each call. Now, before you got that response, were you aware that there was an issue with not enough staff being on duty to allow training to take place for the full day?
Obviously, at this time, we did have an issue with staff in numbers, but we would have detached staff to complete the day's training.
So nobody had come to you to tell you that there was a problem with not enough staff being on duty so that you could have the full day's training?
Well, no, they didn't come to me because I was aware that we had staffing issues. The fact is that I would have released staff to carry out that training.
Right. Had anybody asked you for more staff or more time or more resources to ensure that, even though there was no damage to the integrity of the full day's training as it was designed, nonetheless a full day could be devoted to it? I
was asked for more staff, but we just can't magic staff up as people. We always ask for more staff, but there was no staff available.
Now, if you go to your reply, you'll find a reply at LFB 000399935. And you can see there at the bottom of page 1 there's an email from you to Vic Bagnall on the 7th of February 2013. I say reply. It is a reply, but it's a response rather to Vic Bagnall rather than a reply to Nicky O'Shea. And you say...
I can't see that on mine at the moment.
No, because if you go to page 2, you've got the text.
Yes.
Morning, Vic. Can you let me know who managerially changed the role play element of the FSG? This is a fundamental part of the training to confirm understanding and was highlighted in the training audit and directed by the original FSG training. Listening to mock calls as stated by Nicky is not what we expected. I would like role play to be introduced into our training as a matter of course and not skipped over because the staff are uncomfortable with it. Now, what did you understand had happened at that stage to the active role play from the original training? Now, I say the original training, I mean the ONYA original training.
They didn't deliver it. They used the passive role play, so they'd reverted back to listening to calls as opposed to using the active role play, which is what we envisaged would be done.
I'm sorry, maybe my question was garbled, but at the point that you were told of all this on the 6th of February, 7th of February, at that point, what had you understood had happened to the active role play from the original training, where there was proper role play?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Sorry. So
Well, at the point that you received the email from the day before, and we're asking questions about
yes.
it. At that moment, what did you think was happening with role play in the on years?
They were doing active role play.
Right. So you didn't know that they'd been downgraded to passive?
No.
Right. Now, you can see the response if you go to page 1 that comes back from Vic Bagnall. He says there, "Hi Scott, I will research and come back to you." And shortly after that, you send him an email, "Morning Vic." Do you see that?
I do.
I've just had my arse kicked about the length of the full FSG training. In the report we say it's a full day, and yet we have just carried out the training in 4 hours with no role play. Dave was very unhappy and made it very clear to me it makes us look unprofessional in court. I appreciate you've just picked this up, but we need tighter control of the trainers and not let them freelance, as they have appeared to have done on this occasion. Now, to be clear, your reference to Dave, I assume, was to AC Brown.
It was.
And was it he who had applied his foot forcefully to your posterior?
It was.
Yeah. And is it right that there were two problems here? One was the absence of any role play unbeknown to you, or the downgrading of role play unbeknown to you, apparently, and the other was the reduction of the FSG full-day refresher training to 4 hours, also unknown to you.
That's correct.
Did you discuss both of those with AC Brown?
I did.
What did he say to you?
Get them back to the way they were.
Get them back to the way they were. Did you tell SOM Baniel that the trainers had freelanced?
Did I tell him that they'd freelanced?
Well, why did you tell him that?
Because some of the training in the past, the trainers did tend to do their own thing at times.
And they shouldn't have done?
They shouldn't have done, no.
Does that tell us that there was poor and inadequate oversight and supervision?
Well, I mean, to be fair to Vic, he had just taken over that role, so he was sort of picking up from where Lindsay left off.
I see. And did he ever come to you? Presumably he didn't, and say, "There's a lot of freelancing going on"?
Well, I don't think at that point he realised that, and I think we were tightening controls from then on.
We see what he says in his reply to you at LFB 000552221 of page 2. Now, it's quite a long message, but given its importance, I should read it to you. If you go to the very bottom of page 2 over to page 3, it's your exhibit 30. You can see what he says. I just want to make sure we're looking at the right document. The bottom of page 1, if you look at the bottom of page 1, this is his email to you, 7th of February 2013 at 14:06. And it starts at the top of page 2, "Hi Scott." Do you see that?
I do.
Now, the structure of this email is not that straightforward. But he says, included below is some text from Chris explaining how we arrived at the point we are now. And then if you look down at the middle of the screen, Chris's text now, and quotes, "The form, the role play element in the initial training, from my experience, did not necessarily achieve what was hoped. The feedback we received was that people were more concerned about making fools of themselves rather than actually benefiting from the exercise. We also did role play after the computer-based refresher training in 2011. This was conducted on a one-to-one basis by either me or Nikki or supervisors. Role play is an inexact way of validating training, as you cannot replicate the same conditions and cover the same information each time as it is done by different trainers / supervisors. I approached Lindsay about changing the approach for this last session of training and recorded 2 mock role-played calls by me and Nikki for the staff to listen to and access. The recordings were not simply examples of a very good call versus a bad one. There were some differences, most notably not checking if the caller could get out and why they couldn't get out on one of them. We also discussed the difference between one call where Nikki followed the riff when speaking to the caller and the other she did not and simply used our script. The operators commented that the flow of the call was better when using the riff, emphasising our message about using it every time. We supplied an assessment sheet for them to fill out when the calls were played, and we went through them afterwards comparing the content. We used the riff as a reference point for the validation sheet. Each session was taken very seriously and the feedback was positive. The staff expressed the view that they could concentrate on what was actually said and reflect on how they would approach such a call. It is agreed that the operator's job, ideally in an FSG call, is to concentrate on the caller, whilst supervisors are ensuring the mobilising and information flow is done. Having experience doing the role play, as stated before, operators were more worried about the mechanics of mobilising, which in some cases outweighed the benefits. When we were running the initial training, a lot of discussion took place during the day about the forthcoming role play and how people were worried about it. I honestly believe that this had in some cases a detrimental effect on the whole day's training. There was one operator who refused to do it and had to do it at a later stage by me with kid gloves. It was suggested by management at the time that the more we do the role play, the less worried people would be about it, but of course we need to have that opportunity to do it during the year. And then she goes on to say, the approach we took this time, in my view, is role play. Nikki and me role played and the staff assessed it and were engaged in the process and were able to maintain a consistent approach throughout training. The best form of role play has been demonstrated when we did the FSG exercise in the room. It was in context and the whole watch was involved. And then the quotations end, and SOM Bagnall adds to the end of his email, at the very foot of your page, I hope this helps, Scott. Sorry Dave laid into you, but perhaps we should have picked this up on this report point before it was submitted. Now, by the report, is SOM Bagnall referring there to the Lacanal control report that was submitted to the coroner?
I'm not sure, but it points that way.
And now if we scroll up to page 1 of this email run, we can see your response back to SOM Bagnall on the 8th of February 2013. Morning, Vic. Thanks, Vic. I agree this should have been picked up before the report was submitted and we all had the opportunity to review the report before it went to the coroner. I would have picked it up had I been cited on the change to the training, but I wasn't! ! Regardless, we as a managerial team have been caught out. Hopefully it will not come up in court, but if it does, it is going to be difficult to mask over the fact that we have said one thing and do another. I've had a discussion about role play before, and I find the mitigation of worried staff a weak excuse for not carrying out the training as detailed in the government training documentation that we are stating we abide by. I've carried out training in both environments, role play and passive role play. Role play has the impact that the passive one don't. Chris is not a supporter of role play, that's very clear, but documentation and audit state the contrary, and until there is a change to those documents, I suggest we follow them. Not only that, Vic, but it wasn't ratified at our meetings, and therefore we did not all have the information available to us. Perhaps we can discuss the way forward at our next meeting. Now, why did you think worried staff was a weak excuse for not carrying out the training in accordance with national guidance?
I just think, as Chris stated in her email, that staff were more concerned about being uncomfortable doing a role play. Worry is perhaps the wrong word. It was the fact that they were embarrassed by doing it. And
you thought that was a weak excuse for not following government guidance?
I mean, we said that we would do active role play. Active role play is what we should have done. And like I say, if we were to propose a change to that, then we'll take that to the board and see if it will be accepted. But until that time, then active role play is the way.
Yes. And am I right in thinking that we get from your message that you were concerned that the coroner had been misled because the LFB Lacanal Control Report of November 2012 had said in terms that role play had been introduced into the training?
Yes, I believe that is the case.
Did you do anything to ensure that the coroner was given the correct information that the role play exercise had changed?
I fed back to Mr. Brown, who would have fed back.
I see. Do you know what AC Brown fed back to the coroner?
I don't know.
Right. Now, you say here, as we've seen, that you weren't cited on the change to the training. Let's just look at that a little bit more. Can we please go to an email from the previous year at LFB 000060696? Now, this is an email from Chris Sharp to Natalie Bagnall, and you can see that you are one of the people to whom it's addressed.
Yep.
It's dated the 27th of September 2012, and the subject is fire survival training, and there are four presentations identified there at the top, and it looks as if they're attached. Hi everyone, me again about the training. It's from Christine Sharp. And just to put the date in its chronological context, this is some 2 months before the LFB's control report was finalised in November 2012. Now, first, are you able to explain why the content of the training was only being finalised in September 2012?
No, but that was just after the Olympics, so the focus would have been on the Olympics at that point.
Right. Now, and one of the matters that Christine Sharp picks up in this email halfway through it is the three presentations, behaviour of fire, building construction and fire survival policy, PowerPoints, and she says we will not be touching those. What she says is, we will be changing our approach to difficult calls and role play. It is our intention to contact everyone before the training starts to consider calls, any kind, they have taken that have presented them with some kind of difficulty. We will then hold a short workshop at the beginning of the training to discuss this. The role play this time will be pre-recorded, simulated fire survival calls, which we will ask people to critique and score. Now, just summarize, is that a description of what you described as passive role play?
It is.
I see. Now, do you agree, given that you received this email in September 2012, that you were aware of the change to the role play element of FSG training at that time?
I was included in this email, but I don't. The fact that I responded to Vic at that time saying I didn't means I didn't pick it up. I go through a number of emails on a daily basis. I would have seen that fire survival training was being organised. I obviously didn't read the email in detail, because had I done, I would have raised the red flag on it.
Well, I think you answered my questions, but do you accept that on the documents you were aware of the change to the role play element of FSG training before the Lacanal control report was finalised?
I wasn't aware that it was changed. There's an email there to say I was CC'd into it. What I'm saying is I don't remember or don't recall reading that, because if I did, I wouldn't have accepted it.
Well, you're not CC'd into it with respect. You're actually...
All right, yes.
And it's addressed to hi everyone, and it was clearly a round robin from Christine Sharp, who was telling everyone she thought was important to know about it, of this change to the role play. So the question arises, well, why didn't you read it and take it on board when it was sent to you, given your role?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Did Christine Sharp discuss this proposal with you otherwise than in this email?
Not that I'm aware of, no, not that I can recall.
Do I take it from your answers a moment ago that you did nothing, having received this email, to make sure that this change was not implemented, given that it was not in accordance with the national guidance?
I don't recall the email, so I wouldn't have actioned it because I didn't see it.
It looks
or it was obviously sent to me, but I don't recall reading it. Like I say, had I done, I would have taken action on it.
Right. And did an alarm bell not ring with you when you saw this? that 2 years previous, SM Kelly's recommendation in his August 2010 audit report, as we've seen, was that the role play element, or one of was that the role play element should be made more robust.
No, but I agree that the role play element should be more robust. I'm a pro active role play, and hence why I didn't action this, because I don't recall reading it.
It looks from the passage I've read to you that the decision to change the approach to difficult calls and role play had already been taken. Would you have expected that decision to have been run past you first?
Yes, and the fact that Joanne Stibbard and Lindsay Turner are in that email as well, I'd expected that to have been discussed.
So this is an email which is telling you, first, that there's going to be a change which would push you even further away from national guidance. Secondly, it was something that was different from what the National Board was had been told in 2010. Third was not in accordance with SM Kelly's recommendation in August 2010. And fourth was completely out of line with the reporting lines. And yet you did nothing about it.
Because I don't remember reading the email.
Can we then move to LFB 001061?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you just explain this? I mean, Christine Scharf is an assistant operations manager, so she sits below Mr. Bagnall, for example.
That's correct.
In the hierarchy. Why is she sending this email?
Because she was the lead trainer. She was the most experienced trainer we had in control. So she had acted to operations manager previously, but then when they removed the operations manager role from training and technical group, she was put back down to AOM, but she was still the lead trainer and the most qualified trainer at the time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Can we go to LFB 00106101? That's 0010601. This is an email from you to Dave Brown, 15th January 2013. Subject: Training Audit Summary Report, update Jan 12. I probably ought to be update Jan 13, but that doesn't matter. Morning, Dave. Detailed training audit summary as directed. And if we look at the attached document, it is at LFB 00106102. And we looked at this document earlier in your evidence, but if we go to page 2, under recommendation 5, it says, review the role play element of the course and ensure that a robust assessment process is implemented. And underneath that in red it says, role play was reintroduced into the full day refresher training to confirm and reinforce understanding. It is not used during the CBT training package. Presumably, you didn't tell AC Brown about the decision to replace the active role play with passive role play that you'd been told about by AOM Sharp in September 2012, as we've seen, because you didn't read the email.
Yes.
Then if we go on to LFB 00060872, I'm sorry, can I just stick with the document we had on the screen? There's a further question that I want to ask about it. You say role play was reintroduced into the full refresher training to confirm and reinforce understanding. Now, this document is dated or sent in January 2013, as we've seen. That was before the email exchange of the 6th, 7th and 8th of February.
Yes.
In the middle of the inquest, where Tom Davis's questions then got answered, and we've seen that exchange. So at this stage, when you're sending this document to Dave Brown, you aren't aware that the role play had been downgraded to passive.
That's correct.
So what you're telling Dave Brown, notwithstanding the email that you had, was actually incorrect or incomplete.
No, because that was my belief. The review the role play element That's what SM Kelly suggested.
Yes.
And we introduced that role play element into the 2010 training.
Yes. And in 2012, it had been downgraded to passive.
Yes, but I wasn't aware at that time.
And that's the reason why you say what you say. My point is, what I'm putting to you is, and my point to you is that, do you accept that it is incorrect or incomplete to say that role play was reintroduced into the full day refresher training to confirm and reinforce understanding? Because what was introduced was not reintroduced, it was a different form of role play.
What, for 2012 you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, but I didn't know at that point.
I appreciate that.
So this, to me, was correct at the time.
I appreciate that. Let's take it in stages. Never mind about what you thought. Looking at what you were told, assuming you hadn't not read that email,
yes.
Do you accept that the statement, role play was reintroduced into the full day refresher training, was erroneous and incomplete because the role play introduced in 2012 was not the same as had been introduced in 2010?
Yes, yes. Once I was made aware of it.
Yes. Now let's then move to the document I wanted to go to with you, which was LFB 000060872. This now comes back to the February story. It's now the 9th of February 2013, and here comes Dave Brown with an email to you after the arse kicking, and he says, Scott, your views, ... and he's forwarding something to you. And it says, I have read the email below and I've discussed the issues with Scott. As a result, I've laid out below, A, what I see as our position with regards to the hearing on Tuesday, and also, B, what our position will be going forward in terms of the points raised. And then if you scroll down, please, skipping over supervisor training and go down to refresher training, it says this: as far as the hearing on Tuesday, we need to be clear that there is now refresher training every year, but we also need to accept that the duration has differed. The details are listed below. First bullet, a full day's training was given in 2010 when I'm informed that records show we trained 108 staff. A half day's training was given in 2011. The reason for this was a half day is due to the amount of resources required for a full day's training year on year, and how this needs to be balanced with other training commitments as well as workload and control. In 2011, I'm informed that records show we trained 106 staff using a PowerPoint presentation validated with role play. Future half-days training sessions will involve a CBT package. NB, this CBT package would have been used in 2011, but had not been fully developed. A full day's training was intended to be delivered in 2012, but pressures of Olympic planning meant a half-day's training was provided, but using the same format as in 2010, i.e. an FS officer. Now, did you respond to this email, do you think? We've not found one.
No, I probably, yes, I would have done. I always responded to Mr. Brown.
Yes. Do you remember what views you provided him with?
I don't, but I agreed predominantly with what he said.
Did you tell him that a full day's training was intended to be delivered in 2010, but Olympic planning had caused a reduction in the training to half a day?
I didn't say that. In my view, it was that they moved to because it was a new shift pattern. They moved onto that training.
Right. Did you tell him that there had been a resourcing issue with providing a full day's training year on year?
He's aware of the resourcing.
Did you ever ask him for more resources to overcome the issue about resources?
I don't recall, but I would have asked for more resources. But like I said, it's not quite as straightforward as just grabbing someone because they need to be control trained. So a resource would take, 6 to 12 months to train. But yes, I mean, like I say, I was always after resources, which is I hark back again to the fact that I'd like to have outsourced the training.
The email then goes on to say, in the future, training will consist of alternate full days training, as specified in the report, and half-day CBT packages. Therefore, in 2013, a full day's training will be delivered, and in 2014, a half-day CBT package, then in 2015 a full day, and so on. Now first, did you agree with the intended training plan as set out by AC Brown?
Yes.
It appears from that the order had been reversed, because we were now moving to odd years for the full day's training and even years to the half day.
12 was full, 13. 2012, oh yes, I see what you mean, yeah.
Yes. Had he fully grasped this pattern?
I think he had. I think it was just, he was. I don't know what he was thinking, to be honest with you. But I can see that we did do a full day in 2012, and it should have been a half day in 2013, full day in 2014.
Yes.
But he's reversed it there.
Right, and presumably you didn't.
No, I didn't.
Correct.
I didn't pick up on that because I just saw the full day and half day training, which is what we intended for the board.
Right.
I didn't necessarily detail the dates, years.
Leaving aside the question of the reversing of the alternation pattern, do you know if the coroner was provided with the update about the changes to training set out in this email?
I don't know, but I would suggest the fact that we were asked to provide an update was provided.
Now, there's no mention here that the role play was only passive. The role play itself had been downgraded to passive in the way that we've seen reflected in the 27th of September 2012 email. Did you inform him about that at this time?
He was aware that there was, obviously because he'd spoken to me about it. So, yes, he was aware.
Can I ask you then to look at your first statement at page 24, paragraph 69. And you say, 6 lines up from the bottom of the paragraph, having received clarification from Vic Bagnall, and that's a reference to the emails of the 6th and 7th of February we've now looked at.
Yes.
You say, I directed him to ensure that the active role play element of the training was reintroduced in line with the recommendation of SM Kelly. However, 2013 was a year in which the training was by CBT via PowerPoint, so would not have included a role play anyway. As I will go on to explain, formal refresher FSG training, instructor alt CBT, did not then take place consistently until 2017. Given that the control staff had not undergone an active role play session since 2010, wasn't there an immediate need to implement the active role play exercise at once rather than rigidly stick to the biennial training plan?
Potentially, yes. It was, and in hindsight, yes. But at the time, there were other priorities. They'd done the training at that point. So the intention was to carry out the training at the next available time. We didn't know at that point that the following FSG training wasn't carried out as planned.
When you say the following FSG training?
Well, after 2013, we didn't do consistent FSG training up until 2017 due to the issues I've raised about the competing priorities we had with the introduction of RMC with vision.
Right. You say with the benefit of hindsight, one can agree or disagree about that, but at the time, did you perceive there to be an immediate and indeed urgent need to implement the active role play exercise rather than sticking to the biennial pattern?
Going back that far, I didn't consider it, I don't think.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Hayward, we're going to have to break there for the afternoon. I'm afraid, again, I'm going to have to ask you to come back and continue your evidence tomorrow.
Of course.
And we'll resume, please, at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And in the meantime, please don't discuss your evidence or anything to do with it.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Right? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. 10 o'clock tomorrow, then.